Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this Thursday evening. I'm really excited to be with you guys today and to have a special guest. She is special in so many ways. So it's Samantha Leonard here from Stream Dental Staffing Solutions. And as you know, Stream Dental is committed to helping our fellow dental professionals create their dream team, their dream practice, and your dream life. So joining us today is Stream Dental's very own HR expert, Lindsay. I'm so happy to have her on. So we're going to go over everything and anything related to human resources, followed by a special Q&A session where we're going to answer any questions that you have. So feel free to pick Lindsay's brains. So please comment below and fire away, no pun intended, with your questions. So everyone, please give Lindsay a warm welcome for us, and make sure to hit the love buttons and the like buttons and say hello to Lindsay.
Hi, everybody.
Before we dive in, I want you guys to get to know Lindsay a little bit more. So maybe, Lindsay, if you don't mind telling our tribe a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Lindsay, and I have been doing human resources, recruiting, staffing, and training for over a dozen years. I have extensive experience in oil and gas manufacturing and student housing, and then also in fine jewelry retail. And I left my corporate job about 5 years ago and started working virtually for many different types of clients, including dental clients. And I love helping small businesses to understand the value and the importance of human resources and recruiting and the proper ways to do it in your specific state and municipality. And I love the opportunity to work with Stream Dental and help all of their clients to understand their HR and their business so that they can grow and thrive.
That's amazing. And you are so well versed, and I always pick your brains all of the time when it comes to HR. And so we're very, very lucky to have you with us today. Thanks so much for joining us. And I hope everybody is ready, because we had over 25 questions that were sent off to us to talk about during this live. So unfortunately, time isn't going to prevent us to be able to go over all 25 questions, but we actually broke it down into a few different HR categories. So in that way, we can make sure that we're really thorough. We give you the right resources, the right support to be able to help you be successful in this area. So tonight, we're going to be talking about hiring and firing. So get your notepads ready, get your pens ready, because there's going to be a ton of great HR advice. So why don't we start off? I'm just going to list all of these questions here for you guys. So this is something that we get asked all of the time. How do you find good team members? So Lindsay, why don't you start us off with that?
So really the most important thing whenever you're hiring somebody is to find somebody who's a good fit, and I call it perfect fit or the right fit for your company, and that's a personality fit. Somebody can have all the skills and qualifications that you need, have gone to all the amazing schools, worked at the best practices, but if they don't have the right personality at the time they're at in their life while they're working for you, then it's going to make it very difficult. You're not going to get the best out of them. And things change through people's lives. People go through big things like divorces, marriages, moving, having a new baby, those kind of things where they might have otherwise been a great worker. They're just so overwhelmed personally that maybe at that time their personal goals don't match with their professional goals.
Definitely.
So I always like to recommend people to hire for personality more than they hire for skills and qualifications, because you can find skills and qualifications all day long, but that personality fit is that one in a million. So that's really what you should be looking for, and you should dive deep into those personality questions, because that person's going to be there for the long run.
Right, exactly. And that's something that we tell and work with our clients all the time, is really understanding what your direction is for your practice. So we always kind of start off by figuring out what your 5-year growth plans are. So reverse engineering where you want to be. So in that way, we can help find somebody who has the right skills, who has the right personality, who can add value now, but who can also take you where you want to grow into. So definitely the first thing is going to take a lot of forethought. It is going to take some time, but remembering what your mission and vision statement is really going to help you be able to find the people with the right skill sets, the people with the right who's a forward thinker, who's going to really take you where you need to go. And oftentimes I see practices, they don't really think about their staffing needs until they have to fill that vacancy, right? So you're almost going to panic mode.
Yes.
And that's usually the time when you end up settling for a candidate who is maybe the best person out of the pile of resumes that you received. And that could end up being a big mistake later on, realizing that they're not the right fit. But when you're in panic mode, you don't really make the right decisions, right? So even before you need to hire somebody, you need to identify the traits, the qualities, the skills, and the cultural fit of what you're looking for, so you can actually make that a successful hire and someone who's going to be with you long-term and grow with you long-term. So is there anything that you recommend to be able to kind of help find, like, is there any?
So I have 2 personality questions that I absolutely love to ask. And you know what? People that I ask this question to usually ask me later on after they're hired, like, I love that interview question, and why did you ask it to me? So
Right.
The first one I ask is, what was the last book you read? And I'll be honest with you, there is no wrong answer to that. It just lets you know what they're kind of into and what place they are in their life right then. They might be reading a self-help book, or they might be reading a book in college, or they might be reading something about history or art or politics or something like that. And it lets you see kind of deeper than those standard answers that you get in most interviews. And the other one that I like to ask is, what are your personal and professional goals for the next year? If somebody answers, I hope to graduate from my MBA and move to Kentucky or something, you'd be like, okay, well, that doesn't fit with your company's
Right.
goals. So
Exactly.
that's a good job. Or I want to, get married and have a baby, or I want to go back to school, or I'd like to make a complete career change, or something like that. If their personal and professional goals aren't in line with what you want for the position, then that lets you know that they might not be a good personality fit for you at the time. And those are just 2 examples of really great questions, but you can also just, Google personality questions, and Google will show you a million personality questions that you can ask, but those are 2 of my favorites.
Yeah, I really like that book one. I'm going to have to borrow that one.
Yeah.
One of my favorite ones I love to ask is if you had 5 job offers in front of you right now, which one would you select and why? And so that really just kind of gets a good feel of what their priorities are, right? What's their philosophies, what's important to them. So if some of them are just kind of lifting off like money, I want benefits, I want this, then you just know that they're going to be a 9 to 5. They're just going to care about what just clocking in and clocking out. But if you're looking, if it's somebody who's saying about how, like you said, maybe they are looking and passionate about expanding in their career and eventually going from being an admin to an office manager, like that's somebody who's going to be there long term. And if you can offer that to them and offer them to be able to invest in their personal growth and development, they're going to stay with you long term. So just kind of using like those questions exactly, instead of asking those leading questions or tell me what's your biggest weakness or tell me, it doesn't really give you an idea of who they are as a person and what they can add as a value to your practice.
Right. And also too, if somebody asks questions, I love it when people ask questions. If they're not asking me questions during an interview at any point during the interview, then they're not a critical thinker, and they're not somebody who can think quick on their feet. They might have questions for me later on down the road or whatever, but I want people to ask me questions in the interview. It shows that they're interacting and they're engaged in the interview, and it shows me a part of their personality as well. So
yeah, that's a really good point. And we had Lucy here. Can you see like when I post these things? Can you see this on your screen? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, Lucy just said, I love that. Reverse engineer where you want to be. Definitely. That's going to really help keep that long-term vision of where you want to take your practice and who you need on your team to help get you there. So I guess since we're on the line of hiring, you're doing the interviews, you're doing the pre-screening, like what are some red flags to look for when you're hiring?
Okay, so I was just talking to a group of women business owners earlier today, and that was another question that they asked too. So this is something that's universal. It's not just about the dental industry. It's all people that are hiring in all businesses. So one thing that I say is, first off, is think of an interview as a first date, because that's really what it is.
Totally. I love that.
It's a first date. So if they throw any kind of red flags where you wouldn't want to go on another date with this person or be married to them for the next year, then those are the same red flags that you want. Like if they have some, super annoying habit or tick or something that would just drive you bananas, that's obviously a red flag, but that's a personal thing. And, but if they talk badly about their previous employers or previous coworkers, that is a huge red flag. Walk away. If they make excuses for poor performance or anything like that, that's a walk away. I would not hire them. If they talk about their personal problems a lot, I would not hire that person. And I mean, the list goes on and on, but that's why I like to use that analogy of first date, because that's really what it is. If there's anything present in that first interview that upsets you or makes you uncomfortable, even if you can't quite define what it is, that's going to continue on through onboarding and into having them as an employee within your organization. And you don't want that. So just listen to your gut. That's my best advice for red flags. Listen to your gut.
I agree. And I think that's such a great analogy because it's true, right? This individual is on their best behavior during an interview. So if this is their best foot forward, it ain't going to get better after this.
No.
Right? So that's a really good point. And I think something else for practice owners and for office managers to really keep in mind is that, dentists, they started their practice to be able to help change patients' lives, right? Improve their health, improve their smile, but ultimately to create a successful business for themselves and for their family. So it's really important to make sure that you keep in mind that hiring the right team member is either going to help you or it's going to hinder your success. So you want to be extremely thorough and diligent during the hiring process because that's what's going to make all the difference. So that's why it's really important to understand exactly what your growth plans are, what's required in the position. So in that way, you can use that information when it comes to interviews, when it comes to asking questions during pre-screening, during phone interviews, and then when you meet them, and then during skills testing, skills assessment interview. It really helps throughout that entire process. So really understanding what you need is going to help you identify the right questions and see what red flags are coming out at you.
Right.
Awesome.
Also, too, if they have anything bad in their background checks or references or anything like that, you'd want to pay attention to that stuff, too. But that's not so much present in the interview. That's just present in the onboarding or hiring process. But that's kind of an obvious given.
Yeah. Do you find that a lot of business owners, even in different industries, like, are they kind of skipping that reference check and background checks?
Yes, almost. If they're a small organization, they're hiring their first 10 employees, they're most likely not doing that background check. It's after they've tried to hire and rehire for the same role multiple times that they start doing that.
Right.
And really, you should be doing it from the beginning. It's a really nominal cost. So, for some peace of mind. And I find that most applicants are pretty honest. Whenever you give them that background check authorization, they're going to disclose what's going to be on it because they don't want to embarrass themselves or waste anyone's time. So they usually tell you up front what it is, and it's usually not something that's terribly bad. I have seen some bad things before, but not anything like, really terrible. So
yeah. Well, that was actually a question. Let me switch the screen here. So is it important to get background checks?
Of course.
And I think you brought up a really good point as well, is that we need to get their consent to do background checks.
Yeah, and in some states like New York, you'll have to get, even for a financial background check, like you wouldn't run a credit report on something. You would run a financial background check on them, and they would have to give the authorization for that.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that we can't just automatically just jump into. We need their authorization to hold their criminal history.
Yeah.
And something like, just to kind of reiterate how important it is I always use the analogy of if you're buying a house, you always get a home inspection, right?
Right.
That's a huge money, thousands of dollars that you're investing, and you could potentially be walking into a money pit.
Mhm.
Of course, you're not going to buy a house without doing a home inspection. You don't want to risk losing thousands of dollars. So why are you going to hire somebody without doing a reference or a background check?
Right.
Because performing background checks on potential employees is really going to save yourself from potential disasters that could affect your business and your reputation. So unfortunately, in our industry as well, there's a lot of fraud that's committed. So taking that one step can literally save you thousands. It can avoid you from hiring somebody who has previously committed fraud in the past.
And litigation with clients, litigation with
Exactly.
HR. If somebody has been in court with their last 3 employers doing, like unemployment claims or whatever, or frivolous lawsuits for being fired or terminated, it would show up on, a public records check, and you would know that. And that might not be somebody you would want to hire.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Because I always just kind of thought about more of the criminal records in the past for fraud, but also as well as that we in the dental industry, we're dealing with a vulnerable sector. So children, you're working on patients who are under 18. You don't want to have someone with a criminal history or somebody who's on the sexual offenders list working on children who are under 18 or children or individuals with special needs or disabilities, right? So we need to keep this in mind. You cannot leave your practice or your patients in that vulnerable position. So it's just a risk that you don't want to take on yourself or in your practice.
And that's even an additional background check, and it's free because I do work with clients that are nonprofit that deal with children as well. And there's a national sex offender registry, and you can go in and put somebody's name and information in there and see that they're all clear. And you'd have to get their authorization to do that. But that is a public record that's available to all citizens, not just people that own businesses. So
that's great. Well, maybe if you don't mind, we can get that link and then we can share that with everybody. So in that way they can
share it with everybody later.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so ready for the next question?
Yep.
So what is the difference between working interviews and skills assessment? So maybe I can jump into that one. I'll start because this one always gets me really excited. Okay. So a skills assessment is different from a working interview because it doesn't carry the same type of workers' compensation or unemployment insurance risk that can be found with a typical working interview. But it's something that's extremely important to do because you are using that opportunity to really assess their skills and making sure that they have that high quality of customer service, their communication, their skill set is there. So I would use an opportunity where, for instance, if it's an admin position, that you want to kind of create like a mock patient chart and get them to walk you through and explain the financial or the insurance information. Maybe they'd walk you through on how they would collect any insurance checks, how they would submit claims, or maybe if this was for a hygienist position, you would ask them to kind of maybe do a preliminary oral exam on yourself and then get them to explain how they would let you know what the clinical findings were, how to explain treatment that they would recommend, or how the doctor recommended some pending treatment for them. So, or even if it's an assistant, getting them to go into the clinic and telling them to set up for an endo appointment, getting them to walk you through the procedures and explain post-operative instructions with you. But this is going to help you evaluate their skills, the communication, their customer service, all while avoiding the risks of working on a patient and seeing their confidential patient information, and for them to be able to see your business information without them even being an employee yet. Right. So I would definitely kind of use that approach a little bit more than doing a working interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I highly recommend doing a personality testing like I mentioned before, and I really recommend disc profiling, which is actually something that we offer. So if you're interested in that, that's something that we can do for you.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Okay, so we jumped into background checks, but there's something that we kind of talked about during the background checks is about embezzlement. Mm-hmm. So how can you prevent embezzlement?
So I've actually been through this with clients before who are already like in some kind of hot water litigation. They found out that somebody was stealing from them or whatever. And so we're putting new HR procedures in place for somebody who's already received harm from this. Definitely have to recommend that anybody who is going to be touching monies or in charge of books or accounting or anything like that, that you do extensive financial background checks on them. And I'm not talking about a credit report. A credit report doesn't really show you that. You need to do a proper background check that's financial. It's a credit report plus more.
Okay.
And you have to get their authorization to do that. That's at a bare minimum. And I would require that for every single candidate. I mean, every single person that you're hiring that's working with any finance piece. The secondary thing that you need to do is you need to have fiduciary insurance. And what that does is that actually covers you in the event that there is some kind of misuse of your monies by an employee. Depending on your state and your insurance company, either you carry it for the individual and they get certified in that, or you carry it for your company as a whole. It just really depends on how you're set up, what state you're in or country you're in, but it is available to you. And it's not that expensive, but it does help to cover litigation costs to get the monies back, but also to have a stopgap in the event that you have had a lot of money taken from you.
Yeah.
Also, too, some of those fiduciary responsibility insurance policies will require that each employee that is in charge of finance take a certain period of time every year off so that they can have all of their accounts audited by a third party. So that's something that you need to keep in mind too. That's an extra check for the insurance. Sometimes they require it, sometimes they don't. But even if they don't require it, that's probably a good idea. So you would hire somebody outside of your company in order to do that audit so that they have a completely unbiased opinion of the work that the person's doing. And that's just good practice.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it goes back to, this is your business, right? There's a lot to risk. You want to make sure that you are covering your bases. And in a dental practice, we're constantly exchanging monies, whether that's with patients or vendors or insurance companies. So knowing where your cash is going and keeping track of purchasing, without a doubt, is essential to keeping your practice safe and protected. And it's really important to make sure that you have these kind of systems set up ahead of time, instead of, like what Lindsay was saying, right? You're working with individuals who have already had fraud committed in their businesses, right? So why not set these systems up ahead of time to be able to avoid those potential disasters? So something that we also offer as well is having a cash handling and storage policy. And that's something that we can help support you with. And really that just helps when it comes to counting money when you receive that, and counting a check, and making sure that a witness is present, and making sure that when there's someone who's verifying the deposits, and working to avoid any opportunities where people can potentially be taking money from petty cash or from cash when patients accept it, right? So we've developed this policy and the forms to be able to help practice ensure that they have the proper and consistent cash handling and storage policies and procedures, just to make sure that you're safe and things are taken care of. And I mean, that's just a small area of where fraud can be committed in the practice, but it's just really important to make sure that you have your HR and your standard operating procedures in place. And that's really going to help set yourself up for success. But I mean, it is going to take some time to put that foundation together, right? But I mean, doing that versus saving yourself from headaches and thousands of dollars that you could be losing, like, your sanity is worth it, right? So yeah, so let's go on to the next question. I like this one because we get asked this question a lot. Are you allowed to review their Facebook and ask for credit scores and credit reports?
So like I said earlier, you don't do like a credit report, like if they were buying a couch or renting an apartment from you or something like that. Like it's not the same thing. The financial background checks are way more extensive and will show you more. And that's the more appropriate route to go. And you have to get the proper authorization to do that. Whereas a credit report, they could go get their own credit report and just hand it to you. And that might seem like an easier way to do it, but you're only getting the information that they're giving you. It's really important that you do it, and you can't pull somebody else's credit report because there's no authorization to do that. But you can pull the financial background check. And also, like I said, in New York, there are some limitations to that. There's specific forms you have to fill out and rules you have to follow. So be careful if you're in New York doing that. But social media, yeah, I mean, Google the person, you know, I, as a recruiter, have an applicant tracking system, and most applicant tracking systems are loaded now where once somebody puts their email address into the applicant tracking system, it pulls all their social media. So when I'm in the ATS system, I have one-touch buttons where I can go and look at all, and social media I haven't even heard of before, like things that I don't use, and their Google Plus account and all that kind of stuff. So I go and I look. And I think the important question that's not being asked here really is, what are you looking for when you go to their Facebook account? What you're looking for is inappropriate behavior that might reflect poorly on your company, and that's different for every individual.
Right.
But, if you saw something that was personally offensive to you, that might be something that might be a conflict down the road.
Right.
But, maybe somebody engaging in unethical behavior or, immoral behavior, something like that might reflect on your company poorly at some point. So you got to take that into consideration.
Right. I agree. And I think that's something that we do as well, as we make sure that we take a look at some social media accounts. And I'll tell you, some of the photos that I've seen have been some shockers. But there's a few things to keep in mind, and you touched on one of them. And so let's say you hire this candidate. You're taking some office photos. Maybe your practice is doing something fun and volunteering in a community, and you tag this individual. And then your patients are able to go in and look at this person's profile now because you tagged them. What is the patient going to see? Are they going to be seeing that inappropriate behavior? Are they going to be seeing the provocative photos? Like, what does that say about your practice as well? Right. So it's something that you need to keep that in mind. Like Lindsay said, it goes beyond it really touches into your business's reputation. Right. And so with that in mind, like candidates, you guys need to be remembering that what you put on the internet, the whole world can see. It's not just, oh, my 10 friends who are on here. The moment that their friend likes a picture, it starts going off on everybody else's feed, right? So just remember that other people are out there. You want to keep that in mind, that your potential employers are going to be looking at your social media account. So don't ruin a potential amazing opportunity because of some inappropriate items that you have on there. So remember, the whole world can see. Big Brother's out there.
Yeah, and when we do candidate end training, we do talk about that, making sure that your social media profiles are reflective of your professional life. Yeah, agreed. Okay, so now let's say they've hired the right person. They have their new employee in the office. So why is it important to have probationary periods? Okay, so a probationary period is a period where you're getting to know them and they're getting to know you. The interview was the first date, right? So now we're just having like a honeymoon phase, really. And it's traditionally been done in the U.S. because there's a 30 or 60 or 90-day wait to get onto benefits. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily apply anymore. A lot of times people are using it as a training onboarding period, certain period to get compliance documents in, get certain training in, see how they work with team members and get them up to speed. And because of that, a lot of companies are dropping away calling it a probationary period, and they are calling it an onboarding period, a training period, something like that. And there was a minor litigation about it, but nothing too big. But if you are going to have a probationary period, it needs to be reflected in your policies, and you should probably reflect that in your offer letter as well, so that you and the new team member are on the same page that it is a probationary period. Whether you call it a training period, an onboarding period, introductory period, it doesn't matter. But just make sure that that's clearly expressed to them as well as it. So that's why it's important. And it's just to get to know them a little bit better and make sure they're going to be a good long-term fit for your organization before you start investing more money in them. So.
Right. So what do you recommend to viewers out there to make that probationary period a successful one?
So a lot of times as an HR manager, when people come to me and they want to terminate somebody, because they're not performing up to standards, right? Well, as good due diligence in HR, I want to know, well, what have you expressed to them in writing that I can see that you've told them that they're not meeting your standards? And they're like, oh, no, I just told them. I'm like, no, I need to see it in writing, because in HR, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. And
Right.
then if they can provide that to me, I'm like, okay, what opportunities, tools, and training did you provide to them to get them up to speed? And they're like, oh, well, I didn't provide anything. And I'm like, well, you can't have somebody that's not performing up to your standards if, one, they haven't been notified that they're up to your standards, and two, you haven't provided them with the tools and the training to become up to your standards.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the probationary period is for them to say, you're here and I need you to be here in 30, 60, 90 days. And you provide all the tools, systems, equipment, give them all the keys to the kingdom so that they can get up to that level. And if they don't reach that level in the probationary period, then you can let them go.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to give them all the tools for success. You can't tell somebody to run a race and then tie one of their legs behind them.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what a lot of hiring managers do by not providing them with the, number one, the clear communication, and number two, the tools and systems that they need, tools, systems, and training that they need to get up to standard.
Amen. I love that. I think it's extremely important. Like you said, it's, oftentimes what we've seen is on day one, it's just kind of an orientation. It's getting to know, this is your working station. This is what you're going to do. And then I'll check in with you at the end of the day. Right? That's extremely nerve-wracking for somebody to be walking into a brand new job, not knowing anybody, not knowing what is required of them or what's expected of them. You can't expect to throw somebody into the deep end and expect them to turn into an Olympic swimmer the next day, right? You need to give them, like you said, you need to give them the tools, the resources. You need to give them a mentor who they can work with and check in with them on a daily and weekly basis to see how things are going, and have a system where you can see, okay, so week one, this is what we're going to be training Lindsay today during this week. And then at the end of the week, you can see how they're progressing along. And then you can see if there's any areas that they need some more improvement on. So then starting week two, you can touch on that a little bit further and then build off of it, right? So it's really a natural progression. But if you just throw them in, chances are they're going to be thinking day two if they're going to want to come back or not, or if this is going to be if they're forever home.
And another thing too is if you didn't already do that skills assessment in the hiring and onboarding stage, then you should be doing it right there that first day, because that skills assessment lets you get a temperature of where they're at right then. So that you can say, okay, well, you scored low in these areas in the skills assessment, and I need you to be here in 30, 60, 90 days. And here are all the tools of the system. And then at 30, 60, or 90 days, you retest them that exact same test and see if they came up to where you want them to. So that just goes back to what we were talking about before. So if you didn't do it in your hiring stage, then please do it once you hire the person when they're in their probationary stage.
Yeah, exactly. And just coach them, right? These you need to remember that you're investing in them, right? These are potentially someone who's going to be with you in your family, in your business, long term. Yeah. So you want to give them everything that they need to be successful. You can't just expect them to be able to know everything, and then by the next week you're like, they're not fast enough for me, I'm going to fire them, right? It's just, it's not really setting anybody up for success, because your patients are going to constantly be seeing a new face every single time they come in, and they're going to start going like, well, where is everybody? I don't recognize anybody, right? So it doesn't look well on yourself either. So it's really important to make sure that you have all the systems when it comes to onboarding and integration, and get the proper HR protocols in place. So in that way, they know from day one exactly what's expected of them. Right. So what do you recommend when it comes to like day one for having an HR program for them?
So obviously day one, as an HR person, I'm most concerned about having all the paperwork and compliance items. That's going to be different for every company and every industry, but, Do I have a copy of their ID? Do I have, all those things? So those are the most important things for day one. Sometimes they have all that stuff. Sometimes they don't. Then I usually do an orientation with them at the facility. So this is where the employee lounge is. This is where you park. This is the smoking area, or this is all non-smoking area, or whatever. So orientation to facility. Then orientation to team. So we have some kind of team meeting. If you could also have some kind of lunch or breakfast or something like that. I find people bond really well over food. So have something like that, and make sure they know who their direct supervisor is. Make sure that they know that you have an open door policy with them, either as the owner or manager or hiring manager or their direct supervisor. And make sure that they have all the access to all the tools and systems. If you haven't already done the skills assessment, I would do the skills assessment, or you can do something simple as a review. A review should have those basic components too. And that just gives you, like I said, like a temperature of where they at when they came in. And then just talk to them, answer their questions. They're going to have if they're a very competent employee, they're going to have a lot of questions that first day. They're going to have a lot of questions that first week and that first month, but then it should taper off. So be prepared and make the time and the headspace mentally in order to accommodate that. And if you're onboarding, 3 to 10 new team members at a time, that's going to become very taxing to you, especially if you're trying to run a dental practice and trying to see clients and everything. So I recommend staged hiring for that reason. That way you can give people focused and consistent attention that at least that first week that they're onboarding with you. So.
Right. And I like that point of having an open door policy and not making them feel that the questions that they want to ask or the support that they're looking for, that it's, you're too busy for that. Right. So I think too, if you just kind of throw on their lap a whole bunch of SOPs to read over or a bunch of video tutorials to watch and just lock them in a room and say, I'll catch you later. Right. It makes them feel like you have more important things to do aside from helping them be successful.
But also it really kills morale too, because they feel that you haven't set them up for success. They feel like you're undermining their ability to do their job already on the first day, and that does not build good morale.
Yeah, I agree. So what do you recommend when an office hires somebody? What do you recommend for when is a good time frame for them to give them a key to the office?
So, obviously, whenever you're doing all that onboarding paperwork, you're going to want to go ahead and do assignments of equipment, uniforms, and keys at that time. So we have a form that we offer within our system, but it's just like a tally of everything that you give to them. If you want to wait until after the probationary period to give people keys, that's fine. Just so that you can check them out and make sure they're everything that they say they are. I'm fine with that. But whenever you do assign them a key or a uniform or a computer, grab the serial code off of it, put it down on on an equipment form or, uniform form, and keep it in their HR file so that whenever you do terminate them or they do move on, that you can come back and kind of check them off the list and receive them from them. So there's no right or wrong time to give them a key. Just make sure that you're collecting that information that you did assign them a key, and make sure you collect that from them whenever.
Exactly.
They forget that they gave somebody a key a year ago, and then they have a disgruntled employee on their hands, and they're like, "Great, we got to get all the locks changed now." So just it's easier just to get the key back, but you don't remember to get the key if you didn't properly check it out in their in HR file.
Yeah. A funny story.
Mistake too.
I was just about to tell my story about that. Well, when I started off, some people know my background, but I started off as a dental assistant. I did that for 5 years, and then I eventually transitioned into management. And this was I was working with a startup practice and with an employer, my boss, who worked in a completely different city. And so I was the one who was basically starting that practice and building it. And he only flew in 4 days a month. Yeah. So I remember someone that I did end up hiring, and it didn't end up working out. She ended up quitting. I think she drunk texted me and ended up saying a lot of bad things. And so I probably should have fired her the next day, but this was all done through text messaging.
Mhm.
And then in the middle of the night, I'm like, oh my gosh, she has the key. And
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep the rest of the night because all I was thinking about was, if this girl is drunk and she's upset and she's texting me, maybe she might hop into a car and vandalize the office, right? So it's just, like you said, it's just keeping track of that always and making sure that you have the right documentations, that you have the right HR systems in the programs. So in that way, you're protecting your practice and not making little mistakes like I did.
Yeah,
right?
because really, the termination process is just the reverse of the onboarding process. You're going back through all that paperwork and removing them from certain systems and benefits and issuing notifications and collecting tools and equipment and getting them to sign off on certain things. And, so it's the exact same process. It's just in reverse. So, it should take just as long as it took for you to onboard them as it does for you to offboard them. So.
Yeah. And firing shouldn't be done by text, right?
No, it shouldn't be done. It shouldn't be done like in the heat of the moment, and it shouldn't be done remotely. Unless you have a remote team for whatever reason. But it shouldn't be done like that. It should be done in person with due respect and in a calm and organized fashion. And if you can, by an impartial party. So.
Yeah. And like you said, it's important to have the right steps, because sometimes when a termination, you feel like you want to fire somebody, your emotions are up here and you're not going to be making the right decisions and making sure you have your due diligence done. So what are some things that maybe these practice owners can keep in mind when it comes to that point of possibly having to terminate somebody?
Stay calm, stay cool, stay collected, be professional. If you can, have another person witness it. It's just good practice, especially if somebody's in a protected class or there was some kind of issue, which there usually is with termination. Even if somebody turns in their 2 weeks notice, make sure that, you're doing it as professionally as possible. And everything in HR needs to be documented. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. If people don't sign things, on purpose, they decide not to sign things because they're in the heat of the moment and they're just trying to, be difficult. You can say, write down on the piece of paper, offered to the team member and they refuse to sign it and sign it themselves, but make that note and put it in their file and keep it in there, for at least 7 years after their termination date, so that you are really prepared whenever you have an unemployment claim or you have a wrongful termination claim or something like that. What you're doing is you're collecting a file of evidence to protect you in the event that something goes sour down the road. And when I was in oil and gas manufacturing, we went through a litigation with a disgruntled ex-employee who went to one of our competitors and said that we were stealing trade secrets from them.
Wow.
And so it wasn't a specific lawsuit about a disgruntled ex-employee, but that's what a disgruntled ex-employee does. And we were able to throw out the whole case because of my HR files, because we were able to prove that he was a disgruntled ex-employee, and he brought it up to the competitor and it had no base and no claim, and it was thrown out. And I don't know if there are many cases where that's happened. But when I handed that file over to the lawyer and I handed that file over to my boss, they were like, wow, where did all this paper come from? What do you think I do all day? This is my job,
Yeah.
But they were able to take that file because I documented every single thing that happened with that candidate from before they were hired until after they were terminated. Every phone call, every text message, everything. I'm just like an evidence collector,
Yeah.
It helped out in that case, and that probably saved them millions of dollars, to be honest with.
Yeah, for sure. So I always like, my motto in life is always hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Yes.
And like you said, it's just doing your due diligence. Mm-hmm. So sometimes making sure that you have the right to do certain things. So avoiding any issues with individuals who are in protected classes, right? So it's just doing your due diligence, but also kind of knowing exactly what steps you need to take to be able to make sure things are done properly and to cover yourself just in case things go south. So I guess now that we're on the firing kind of topic. Mm-hmm. So the next question that we had was, can I fire somebody that gives notice, or do I have to have them work for the 2 weeks?
So, in the case of a dental practice, if somebody's turning in their 2 weeks notice, if they're like an office manager or CFO of a, like a whole firm of dental offices or something kind of higher up like that, where they have a lot of access to a lot of information, then, and you want to let them go, it's called dismissal. You're not firing them. They already turned in their 2 weeks notice, but make sure when you do it that they've given you a written letter that's signed and dated by them, and you put that in their HR file, and you tell them in a very nice, calm, cool, and professional manner, well, thank you for your notice. We wish you the best of luck. And you can go ahead and, leave now if you want to. That is a kind, nice, legal way to do it, but you're not firing them. You can't fire somebody who's already turned in their 2 weeks notice. But if they're not somebody who can create any problems for you, if it's just somebody who's moving on to something positive and they've never been a problem for you, I don't recommend that you dismiss them, because that might just put a bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but that is actually a very common practice in other industries. This is the first time I'm really hearing about it for the dental industry, but I would imagine it's the same. But it's called a dismissal. You're not firing them, and you would never tell them after they turn in their 2 weeks that you're firing them. That's not even the right term for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a dismissal, and there's nothing wrong legally with that, as long as you have it documented in their file.
Okay. And like you said, though, as well, like if they're leaving on good terms and they're not going to be negative and, polluting the energy or the other team members, then keep them to be able to kind of help with the training of the new employee that's going to be coming on board. But if it's somebody who you think is going to cause more harm than good for the next 2 weeks, then it'd probably be a best interest for your practice, for the team morale, for your patients, maybe for them to leave, right? And dismiss them.
Right.
Yeah. So when it comes to firing, or what is this question? Let me read this one here. So do I have to pay staff owed vacation if they quit or if I fire them?
If you have a policy that says that you pay people, then you need to pay them. If you don't have a policy, you don't technically have to pay them when they leave. But I think that it's almost better just to go ahead and pay that one person, but then create a policy that everyone else signs. It's an unfortunate situation, but if they get ticked off about that, they could go to the Department of Labor or get some kind of state agency involved, and you do not want that happening in your practice. So it's better just to take your knock and pay that one person, but then immediately create a policy that makes that impossible going forward.
So what are some recommendations that you have for putting in a vacation policy?
Okay, so my primary recommendation as far as when it comes to benefits and PTO is to do it separately from your handbook. You should have a completely separate benefits guide. And the reason why I say that is because those things change periodically, and you have to get a new acknowledgement from every single person on your staff every time you change your handbook. So if we're going to make little silly, intricate changes 3 or 4 times a year to their benefits, which seems to have a lot of changes because they have different open enrollment periods, and they might have a new notification or fee schedule that comes out or something like that. So we don't want to be recreating the handbook and getting the acknowledgement 4 or 5 times a year. We want to redo the handbook once a year minimum. Also, too, I think that like accrual charts and that kind of stuff, that is a lot of extra administrative work to handle. Like, do you have a system that goes in? Are you managing it on a spreadsheet? Who's managing it? Are they putting good data in? Are they taking bad data out? Like, it's just a lot of extra work to do accrual. It just should be like, something simple, like 1 to 3 years, you get this set amount, and 3 to 5 years, you get this set amount, and 5 years and over, you get this set amount. And it doesn't roll over. You don't get paid for it when you leave. You don't get paid for it if you don't use it. It's all use it or lose it with no rollovers. And that keeps it nice and clean and simple to administrate. And can be done very simply. Yeah. And then like you said, it's just making sure that
everything's just laid out. What's your requirements for somebody to request vacation time? What's the format? How much in advance do they need to be requesting that time? Like, it can't be somebody who's maybe booked, it's what's today, Thursday, and then they booked a vacation to fly out Monday and they're just texting you about it now, right? It's just making sure you have that laid out properly. And vacation best practices in Canada are a little bit different because it does get accrued. That's the best practice, actually, is to accrue it on every single paycheck. So it's different province by province, but let's say, for example, here in Alberta, you get 4% that accrues on every single paycheck, which will entitle you to 2 weeks. But I've before have worked with a practice who prorated it. So they had 2 weeks, and after 3 months, that individual was able to take their 2 weeks vacation. They took their 2 weeks vacation, and then a couple months later, they quit. So the employer wanted to get that money back. They deducted it from their final pay, and that individual actually filed a claim with the labor board, and the claim was they had to come back and they had to actually pay that money back to that individual. So it's important to make sure you have that laid out, right? And the best thing to do is really just to kind of get that vacation time accrued. So in that way, if they do leave, then they've only received what they've worked for and accrued during that pay period. So again, just all goes back to paperwork and policies and employee handbooks and
handbooks. Got to have it. You've got to have those policies written out because, and something I tell people too is a handbook is kind of like the Bible. Like you go through all this effort, all this thing to like put this perfect handbook out, and you hand it out to 100 people and they have 100 different interpretations of it.
Yeah.
And there's always that one guy or the one girl who's trying to like skew a policy in their favor, and see something in it that you didn't intend. So, it's a living document. It evolves over years. You add policies as issues come up, but you got to make sure to cover your bases in the beginning. And a PTO, a vacation policy is absolutely crucial in a handbook.
Yeah. Yeah. And that also covers overtime and everything as well, right?
What covers overtime?
Like PTO?
Well, I mean, here in the States, the overtime pay is paid after 40 hours a week. So holiday and vacation time doesn't count towards overtime accrual. So
okay,
yeah,
good to know.
And
awesome.
I have to answer that question every time we have a holiday to people that have been working for 30 plus years because they don't understand it. They're like, I should have got overtime on this check. And I'm like, no, you had 2 holidays. That doesn't count towards overtime.
I'm sure we could probably do like a full hour of just overtime and vacation and salary and everything like that, which I'm sure maybe we could do the next time.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody has any questions, feel free to just kind of type them in and we'll push them out here. But I mean, we just really skimmed the surface of some of the questions that were submitted and went over. And, we went over a lot of information, and I hope that clarified some HR questions that you guys have, or maybe helped resolve some of those HR nightmares that are currently keeping you up at night. But I just want to let you guys know that we offer a lot of this support and these resources to be able to help take that off of your plate, help you focus on just going back into really taking care of patients and giving them those gorgeous smiles and making your practice a successful one. So we offer a lot of these HR documents and services, and we've actually been listing the links here. So in that way, you guys can take a look at some of these items that we've discussed, like cash handling policies and handbooks and probationary performance reviews. And I think a new hire bundle as well that we have that we can help support you when it comes to that hiring process. But Lindsay she's developed a lot of our HR policies, and she helps support our US friends, and she can work with you and create and tailor a handbook that is based off of your state regulations and really catered towards your practice's needs. So she's going to answer any questions that you have about HR, and hopefully if you guys have any out there, I don't see anything popping up, which kind of means that we did a good job with answering everybody's questions. But if you do, feel free to reach out to us. And I hope you guys had a lot of fun, and maybe we could do this again. I think because we only did 10 questions, and we had 25, and I think the other ones were we kind of broke them out to employee engagement, and then strictly policies and procedures. And so we can do that.
There's a lot to cover, and we're here to help you. And we actually like helping people. Me and Samantha said today, we're going to help people today. And there is nothing more satisfying to me whenever I get feedback from the clients that say, I went through all this medical school and, built this practice up, and nobody ever taught me anything about HR, and I feel more confident about my business, and I feel more successful in my business. And that's the greatest compliment I could have. I mean, that's just so wonderful. And that's what we want to do for you. So please give us an opportunity. We'd be happy to help.
Well, you are fantastic. Thanks so much for letting us ask all these questions and pick your brain. And let's set up a time so that we can do this again and answer some more questions. And if you guys have any, feel free to comment. And if we can't answer them today, then let's make sure that we do it the next time.
All right.
Well, thanks, Lindsay. I really appreciate you coming on board and helping us today.
Thank you so much, Samantha. You have a great night.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, wait. Alberta, if you dismiss somebody after they have put in their 2 weeks, you have to pay them. Yes, you have to pay them what they're entitled to. So if they gave you a 3 weeks notice, if they gave you 6 weeks notice, then you have to pay them out. So that's for Alberta. So thanks so much, Melanie, for asking that question. Let me highlight that there. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. I know Lindsay just kind of disappeared here. We've reached our hour, but anytime, feel free to message us. Feel free to comment, and we will reply all of those to those questions. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. I hope everybody has a beautiful Thursday evening and your weekend. Take care. Bye for now.